On this episode of Babe Philosophy.
The power struggle is a part of growing pains. It's like that's one of the things that happens in developing deep intimacy and deep relationship. And the key is to stick with it and to really give it your openness, your attention, your patience, your understanding, and to take the time to really see each other.
This is Babe Philosophy,
a podcast where questions matter more than answers, where liminal spaces are revered, and where magic is practical.
We are your hosts, Meli Wolf and Live Wickedly.
All right, y'all. Welcome back to Babe Philosophy. We've got a Meli solo pod here for you. Today, I'm going to talk about the question, is my relationship in a power struggle? I don't actually have anything prepared, but I just find that this topic is so relevant to me in my life. So I'll just speak mostly to my experience of a power struggle and what I've noticed and what I've learned and how I've identified what it is. To start out, I guess I'll just talk a little bit about what a power struggle is, because I think people get confused maybe on what even is a power struggle. And my understanding of a power struggle is essentially when you have two people in an experience that's polarized. And what I mean by that is one person feels that it should be one way and one person feels it should be another way. One person feels there's one truth, one person feels that there's an opposing truth, right? And there is a lack of willingness or ability or tools to be able to meet in the middle somewhere or to see each other's truths, right? And it just becomes a, why can't you see my way? Why can't you see my way? And power struggles can be really confusing because a lot of times for myself, when I'm in a power struggle with anybody, with Liv, with Matt, with anybody, I find myself thinking, like, if they just understood where I'm coming from, they would agree with me. Like if they could just understand where I'm coming from. But they can't because they're so invested in their own reality that they're unable to see mine. And I'm doing the same thing, right? I'm so invested in my own reality that I'm unable to see theirs. So when does this happen? I think this happens a lot in family dynamics in general, just especially like generational differences, right? It's like my parents think things should be a certain way, but I grew up in a different time. I grew up in a different era, in a different generation, and, especially my mom. My mom is a Nicaraguan, straight off the boat, came here when she was around 20 years old, and we have a lot of differing viewpoints of how things should be done. And we can oftentimes get into a power struggle because it's like, why don't you see that this is how I'm going to do it? She has all these ideas of like how a woman should be or how, what it means to be well respected, well educated, all these things that I don't agree with. Now, that doesn't really feel strong for me at this point in my life. I feel like that was a big source of power struggle when I was more like a teenager and like feeling really defiant about like my freedom and like my desire to do what I wanted to do, and she wanted to control me and I was like, ah. But a more relevant form of power struggle that exists in my life today is the power struggle I experienced with my husband, Matt. And I don't experience it as much anymore. We used to experience it a lot. And I think it's pretty characteristic of a certain phase in relationship when power struggle becomes really dominant. That phase is the phase when you transition out of honeymoon, right? Because when you're in the honeymoon phase, you are just getting to know each other, you're kind of putting each other on a pedestal, you're really excited about each other, you want to spend all your time with each other. You're coming into it having been self-sufficient and independent, as a single person before this relationship. So there's a lot of like self-sufficiency. So the ways that they maybe aren't showing up to support don't really feel so detrimental because you're so used to taking care of yourself and doing everything yourself. And this is just new and exciting. And you're just more focused on that. And then as the honeymoon phase ends, there's a huge variety of when honeymoon phases kind of like complete. And I've heard anywhere from 1 month to 2 years. To imagine anybody being in a honeymoon phase for 2 years is like actually insane to me. I'm like, how do people do that? If you have been in a honeymoon phase for 2 years, I'm like, damn, good job. Matt and I had a honeymoon phase for about a month. And then shit started hitting the fan pretty fast after that month wrapped up. And it just became, all of these things came forward about like how I wanted him to show up, how he wanted me to show up. I wanted to spend more time with him. He needed more independence. I needed, emotional support. He needed, freedom to do whatever the fuck he wants and not have to check in with me. And, we're both coming from places that are real and honest to a degree, and feel true. They feel true for what we know, right? And the thing about relationship is there's this transitional period where you really have to acclimate your life to somebody else being there and find the balance of like, what can I ask for and what do I need to be responsible for myself? And in finding that, I feel like a lot of people will enter a really intense power struggle phase because there's so much. For example, I was stuck on the idea of essentially a fairy tale, essentially a fantasy. I essentially wanted to be, like I said in my last solo pod, like I wanted to be everything to this person. I wanted to feel special. I wanted to feel loved. I wanted to feel adored. I wanted to be the center of his universe, right? And, I think some people might hear that and be like, whoa, red flag. And yeah, I think you'd be right to some degree, but I also think that it's okay to desire those things. Like it's okay to feel that. What's not okay is to expect it from somebody else. And that was where I went wrong, and that's where it became a red flag, is like I really demanded it from Matt and I really expected it from Matt. And then when he fell up short, I would be super upset and I'd be like, yo, you did not come through for me in this way. And he'd be super defensive, like, you can't expect me to, right? And then we'd get into this power struggle because I wanted him to see that I just wanted to feel loved and adored. And obviously, like, there were many times where I was wanting that in a way that he couldn't provide it. But we didn't have the presence of mind and the awareness at the time to like understand that there are multiple ways to achieve something. So like I still have this desire, but I now know that I don't need that desire to be filled in this particular way. And anytime I feel like I need a desire to be fulfilled in a particular way, we get into a power struggle because then it becomes about Matt being able to or not being able to fulfill that desire in that particular way. And I will say, no matter how I ask for a desire to be fulfilled, if I ask for it in a particular way, he really struggles with it because it infringes on his sense of freedom. It infringes on his sense of sovereignty. He wants to be able to do it how he wants to. It's not that he doesn't want me to feel those things. He just wants to be able to do it how he wants to. So it took a really long time for me to be able to like kind of melt and thaw into the willingness to allow myself to desire what I desired and let that desire be fulfilled in a myriad of different ways, and let Matt fulfill it in a way that felt good to him and be available for it to also feel good to me, right? That's what like resolved the power struggle. But there is that time where you're just like, no, I want it this way. This is how it's in the movies. This is how I've seen my parents do it, or this is how my friend and her boyfriend are, or this is how, and it's like you want things a certain way and you don't always get to have things a certain way. So that, I think, is really the fundamental piece of the power struggle, is when you attach to something as a certain way and are unwilling to see it beyond that. And I know we all have these in our relationships, like these tender points that are just like almost, we like avoid them because anytime they come up, they, you know, cause a rupture in the relationship. We get into a fight, whatever, because like no matter what happens, anytime that topic comes up, we just like can't come to common ground. Like Matt and I have had a few of those topics, and ultimately what those topics are a persisting power struggle. Because, and it's really hard to get real with yourself about these power struggles because they are a 50-50 game. If you are in a power struggle, it is because two people are contributing 50% to a problem. If you have one person that is just ever so slightly, maybe like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6% willing to thaw the edge of their perceived truth or their perceived reality, and like just 2, 3, 4, 5, 6% have a bird's eye view or a shift in perspective from what the other person might be feeling, then the power struggle is going to immediately start to dissolve, because the antidote to a power struggle is just having the wherewithal to take a second to see somebody else's perspective and make space for it. So as soon as one person's willing to do that, then it creates this crumbling effect of the power struggle, because as soon as I, like, let's say you and I are in a power struggle, as soon as I am like, okay, I see where you're coming from, you immediately have more space now to see where I'm coming from. So you can give me a little bit, and I can give you a little bit. And then we just keep giving each other the benefit of the doubt. We keep giving each other the opportunity to take up the space, and then boom, the power struggle's gone. So yeah, I think power struggles are really common in the beginning of relationships after the honeymoon phase, when you start to realize your expectations of relationship, your desires of relationship, how you want somebody to show up for you, the way that you hope somebody will treat you in a certain circumstance, the way, you know, like if it's important for you to receive gifts, if it's important for you to be picked up from work it's like all these things start to come up a few months to a year, maybe sometimes even 2 years into a relationship, where you're like, oh, actually, this is the kind of relationship I want. Is this person available for that? And then, and then these things start coming up on both ends, and then they may fit seamlessly, they may not. A lot of times they won't, because we oftentimes come into relationship, unless we've been in a lot of really serious relationships and know what it's all about, we come in not knowing what the fuck is up, and not knowing what's real and not knowing what's realistic. I can say that for myself for sure. Like, I always saw the power struggle phase of relationship as when a relationship had expired, right? So I always thought that, oh, if we're starting to have these struggles and these fights and these conflicts, that means that this relationship isn't for me, it's not meant for me, it's expired, it's done. So I would always break up with my partner as soon as we hit the power struggle. So like my relationships never lasted longer than a year. Well, that's not true, not never, but most of my relationships didn't last longer than a year. And the ones that did last longer than a year, like my college relationship, we just kind of stayed in power struggle mode. And eventually, actually, I just forfeited everything that I thought I wanted and needed, because I just was so desperate to be with him that I became a shell of myself, and I just bypassed all of the shit that was important to me. And I lost myself in that relationship completely, just to avoid the power struggle, because I was so scared of us not being right for each other. And then we ended up not being right for each other, because I can't, you can't just disappear from, what you desire, who you are, what's important to you, it doesn't just disappear. So that being said, during this time, I think it's really important to say what it is that you desire, say what it is you expect, say what it is you want in a relationship, and be very, very upfront from the beginning to avoid these power struggles down the line. And that might seem like a lot, but if it seems like a lot to somebody, it's because they're not ready for that, and they're not ready for you. And then that's how you know it's not the right match, right? But if you come to a sticking point and you're like, oh, okay, this is a power struggle because I want it my way, he wants it his way, we're not willing to see each other's perspectives, that's not an indication that you're not for each other. That is an indication that there is work to be done. And sometimes it can mean you're not for each other. Like if one of you thaws and is like, okay, I can see your perspective, like, you know, takes the time to make space for the other person, and then the other person is still not available to see your side or have any kind of conversation about it because it's just too much. And it's like, you know, around something like getting married or having babies or like living in a different country, like that's gonna tell you whether or not somebody's for you. Because if they're not willing to even sit with you on that and have a conversation about that, then it is what it is. But if you find yourself in a power struggle, I think that the power struggle itself is a natural process of relationship development and an important piece of it and a critical piece of it and a piece that nobody can bypass. And I mean, obviously there's exceptions to the rule, but I would say generally the power struggle is a part of like growing pains. You know what I mean? It's like when you get taller and it hurts, your bones hurt. It's like that's one of the things that happens in developing deep intimacy and deep relationship. And the key is to stick with it and to really give it your openness, your attention, your patience, your understanding, and to take the time to really see each other and ask, you know, if you're in this situation, ask your partner, hey, I really want to understand where you're coming from here. And I can feel that this is tender for me in my heart and I'm struggling to like see your perspective. And it does feel important to me to be seen in my perspective, but it feels equally important for me to see you in yours, and I'd like the opportunity to do that. Or something along those lines. I mean, that wasn't perfect, but you get what I'm trying to say. It's like these are initiations into how our relationship is going to be. So you want to treat them with tenderness and care and attention and time, because they are not always a red flag that your relationship isn't going to work. They are more often an invitation into deepening of yourself and deepening of your bond with this person. And deepening of yourself because it forces you to get real with, am I delusional about this desire? Am I delusional about what I think about this? Is the way that I'm understanding this situation not accurate? And can I be open to my mind being changed? Can I be open to understanding a different perspective? Can I be open to collaboration? And if no, then no. But ultimately, that's what growth is, right? It is making space for all truths, making space for everything. And it doesn't mean bypass yourself. It doesn't mean shut down your reality or shut down your desires. If you really want children and your partner feels like he's not ready, and you get into these conflicts over it, maybe there's an opportunity for you to come to common ground that you both do want children, but the timeline for that isn't going to be in 2 years like you wanted. Maybe you agree that you both want children, but maybe the timeline looks more like 5 to 7 years. You know, it's like those kinds of compromises where it isn't like I don't get what I want. It's maybe the way that I get what I want isn't exactly what I thought. So I think that's really all I have to say about this. And for now, at least, I think the main takeaway for me is like the power struggle is not necessarily a red flag. The power struggle is an invitation for examination of self and of other and of relationship in a way that isn't, I'm going to examine this because it is broken and bad. In a way that's like, what is my contribution? What is your contribution? Where can we meet in the middle? Does this feel important enough to navigate through? Does our relationship feel important enough for us to like navigate this experience together? It's just honestly a call into expansion. It's a call into, hey, you have a blind spot here and so does this person. So how are you going to deal with it? Are you going to open your eyes? Or are you going to keep them shut? So me and Liv are going to talk about this later today, actually, together on a podcast. So you'll get the combined reflection between the two of us next week.
Thank you for listening to Babe Philosophy.
If you enjoyed the show, please like, rate, and subscribe wherever you listen, and follow us on Instagram at babe.philosophy.
Later, babes.